As you know, if you've been watching this channel, I've been rereading the Bible. Now, this is partly inspired by Steve Donahue's Western Canon Starter Kit, in which Steve Donahue recommends reading the Bible as the foundation of the Western literary canon. Now, I've actually read the Bible before. I grew up in a religious community, but I hadn't read it for some time. And the other thing I'm trying to do more of, again, inspired by Steve Donahue and other members of BookTube, is to reread stuff more. So rather than just to say, okay, I've read that now, that book is done, on to the next classic, the idea that you need to revisit these classics. Now, if you've been tuning in to any of my videos on the Jerusalem Bible, first of all, sorry. I'm sorry I ramble so much and I'm so incoherent. But secondly, you'll no doubt have noticed that I'm frequently saying, I don't understand this. I wish there was more commentary. I wish there was more footnotes here. And I have been looking up stuff on online commentaries and Wikipedia, but it gets exhausting to always look stuff up online, at least for me. I'd much rather work through a book. So I've been keeping my eyes out for a good commentary book on the Bible. And again, this gets back to something that Steve Donahue recommends in his videos, is to not just read the classics, but to read and reread the classics and read commentaries on the classics. Now, again, if you watch this channel, you'll know that finding specific books is always difficult for me because I live out in Vietnam. I mean, there are books, books in English, I mean. But tracking down a specific book is always touch and go. But there are some used bookstores on Book Street. And one of them actually has a fairly decent religious section. I'm not sure why. I don't think there are a lot of missionaries in Vietnam. When I lived in Cambodia, there used to be a lot of missionaries there. So the used bookstores tended to accumulate a lot of a big religious book section. But at any rate, one of the bookstores on Book Street, which sells used books, which used books are quite random. They're whatever people are traveling through with them and then they drop off. They have a religious section. And every time I go through there, I always scan the religious section to see if there are any interesting commentaries on the Bible. And the stuff I've seen up until this point, I've always passed over because it's been more like discussion questions for Bible study or devotionals, but not like an explanation of the literature and history. Until yesterday, when I stumbled across this, reading the Old Testament An Introduction by Lawrence, how is that spelled? Boadt. So as a book I just stumbled across, I really know nothing about this guy or his background or anything like that, other than what it says on the cover here, which isn't a lot. This is the only thing that the author's bio has. But flipping through this, I eventually did realize that this is a Catholic commentary. One of the things that's noticeable, that marks it as a Catholic commentary, is that it has the apocryphal books in here, or the Deuterocanon. Let me see if I can find a reference to that. Sorry, I'm flipping through with one hand because I'm holding the camera with the other. Okay, here we go. The book of Baruch. That's one of the books that's in the Catholic Bible and not in the Protestant Bibles. And the Jerusalem Bible, which I'm reading right now, is also a Catholic Bible. The book of Baruch and the other apocryphal or Deuterocanon books are also in here. So that syncs up nicely. This book is from a Catholic perspective. I am approaching the Bible as a skeptic myself. But that doesn't mean it won't be valuable reading for me. For one thing, it's useful to see what the religious perspective is, just so that you're exposed to alternative perspectives. For another thing, there's any number of historical details about the Old Testament that are uncontroversial. So, like the background information to the Assyrian or Babylonian or Persian empires is that, I mean, that's attested to by secular historians and religious historians. But it is interesting just skimming through this. It's not an uncritical look at the Bible. It does seem to be questioning the biblical narrative at certain points. Now, I've only just flipped through this, so my commentary on this will be more in depth once I've actually finished it. But it does seem to be taking the position, as far as I can tell by flipping through it, that the biblical narrative is based on fact but is told from a biased perspective. I was noticing some of their sections on King David. Let me see if I can find that. I haven't marked any of these places ahead of time. I was just counting on being able to find them while I was flipping through. Oh yeah, the dark side of David. It talks in this section about how there might be an overly romanticized version of David presented in the Bible, and that there may be a dark side of David that's only hinted at. For example, the revolts by his son and the widespread support they received also suggests that many weren't happy with his despotic rule, especially among the northern tribes, etc. So that actually, if you've been watching my commentary on the Bible, you know that I've been a little bit confused by the footnotes in the Jerusalem Bible, which are also often skeptical of the narrative. The impression that I've gotten is that the Jerusalem Bible, the editors of this, are also approaching the biblical narrative from the same standpoint. So they're not saying it's wholly fictitious, even though there are parts of the historical narrative that we know now are wholly fictitious, like the Exodus and the conquest of Canaan, etc. But that's not the perspective of the editors here. They are not saying it's wholly fictitious. They are just saying that there is bias that is in the text. It's an interesting perspective. I don't know if that's a Catholic thing. I grew up Protestant, so this is a new perspective for me. But, a lot of interesting details here about Canaanite religion and culture, about the 12 tribes and talking about how they might have been organized, about the other ancient people in the land of Canaan. So this is for something I just stumbled upon in the used bookstore. This looks like it's going to be a very nice supplement to my study of the Old Testament. This should have some interesting details here, and it's from a religious perspective, but should have a lot of interesting background information in here as well. Now, all this being said, I don't want to oversell my ignorance or my ignorance of the Bible. I have, again, studied the Bible in school before, where we did have textbooks that accompanied some of the Bible classes I took. Those were all from a religious Protestant perspective. I have also, since starting my blog or since starting this channel, reviewed a number of books about the Bible. The unauthorized version, Truth and Fiction in the Bible, by historian Robin Lane Fox. The Bible Tells Me So by Peter Innes. And then the Yale University Open Course series, which I watched on YouTube and on the podcast feeds by Christian Hayes for the Old Testament ones. So it's one of my hesitations with starting this book, is that I have been through the biblical history a few times over now, and I'm a little bit worried about getting in a yeah, I'm a little bit worried that this constantly going back and revisiting the Bible is keeping me from developing other areas of expertise, because of course all reading comes at an opportunity cost. Um, and unfortunately, I only read a handful of books a year. But this looked like it would be interesting. I mean, even just flipping through it the other day, I came across all sorts of interesting little details. And I think as long as I'm rereading the Bible, I might as well have some commentary to go with it. I've also decided I'm going to start this book now. I was toying with the idea of waiting till I finished a few other books on my bookshelf or on my currently reading list. I've, at the moment, for various reasons, allowed my currently reading list to expand, and we've got a new book club book coming and stuff like that. So I don't want to be juggling too many books because now that I have kids, I really have to be more realistic in my reading goals. And yet, for that same reason, because I'm currently juggling a lot of books, I did think to myself, okay, if you wait for the perfect time to start this book, you're never going to start it. And I already am all the way up to First Chronicles in my read through of the Bible, so well into the historical narrative. I mean, ideally, I would have, yeah, which means a lot of the commentary in this book on the conquest of Canaan and the book of Judges and the kingship of David and stuff like that is stuff I've already passed through. But that's okay. You can't time these things perfectly. And it will be a good revision for me to revisit some of those things in this book. I didn't want to delay starting it any longer because I did want to read this concurrent with my reading of the Old Testament. The guy who wrote this is apparently, his area of expertise is on the prophets. And you can tell this just flipping through the book, that he does give a lot of emphasis to the prophets, as opposed to what might have been my own area of interest, which is just on the kings of Israel and Judah and the Babylonian, Assyrian empires and all the world history which is unfolding in the Old Testament. Although you can see that is in here as well. So I'm not being left out. But the prophets do seem to get a lot of emphasis on this. The prophets are not my own area of interest. I mean, I like, to the extent that there are narrative elements in the book of the prophets. So, for example, Jeremiah, as one example, has prophetic sections, but it also has narrative sections. I like the narrative sections. But the prophetic sections, where we just read lots of, verse, which just goes on for several chapters at a time, I really remember that boring me as a kid or as a teenager when I last read the Bible. I suspect I'll find it a struggle to get through it again when I get up to the prophets. But perhaps all the more reason to read some commentary on it. Maybe the commentary will help me appreciate what's going on more, give me more of a historical framework or a literary framework for what the prophets are doing, again, when I finally get up to them. So, I hope I'm not juggling too many books at once, but I'm going to start reading this concurrently with my reading of the Bible. Now, because the early chapters of this are going to be on parts of the Bible I've already read, it's not going to line up perfectly. But, it never lines up perfectly. I'll just try and read the whole thing straight through once, concurrently reading the Bible, and then I can also use this as a reference to flip back and forth with if there's anything about the current parts of the Bible I'm currently reading. So, adding this to my list of currently reading books, I'll try and talk more about it in the weekly reading vlogs, and then once I finish it, I'll come back with a review.